Who determines Bitcoin's worth? Turns out you do, just like everything else in the entire world. And this is a concept people have a hard time with because most people have never thought and just don't understand how markets work. A market is anything where people buy and sell anything. The grocery store, insurance, a used car lot, all of those are markets. Anything where anything is bought and sold is a market. And on markets, the value and worth and price of anything is reflected by supply and demand. In the case of Bitcoin, the total supply is limited to 21 million. So there's no new supply, beyond 21 million. It's a set supply, which means the price is determined by the buyers and sellers of who wants Bitcoin right now as compared to who wants to sell Bitcoin right now to buy a car or improve their lifestyle in some way or go on a nice vacation or whatever it is they might be spending their Bitcoin on. So, for a lot of people, markets, once they understand how markets are work, it's sort of scary for them because they're like, but wait, that means I thought a dozen eggs was worth $4. I thought it was worth $4. It's like, no, the fact that you go to Kroger or Costco or whatever and it says a dozen eggs is $4, that does not mean they're worth $4. That does not mean someone gave them that value. Someone stuck the price on it with their little price stamper machines, whatever. They stamped that price because in their best estimation, that was the clearing price where supply and demand balanced. If there was suddenly a massive shortage of eggs, uh, they would raise the prices, and they would raise the prices because the eggs would be flying off the shelves as everyone realized that eggs were in short supply and they couldn't get additional eggs to restock the shelves. So the price would rise $5, $6, $7, $8 per dozen eggs. But that is not because they're inherently worth that. That is because people want them and they're in short supply. And so the price rises. And the price rises because the people who are selling them understand that the price that they're sticking on it is a function of supply and demand. Now, with liquid markets, liquid meaning they're in a constant state of flux, like the stock market, and stocks and bonds and commodities like gold, silver, rice, beans, wheat, gold, Bitcoin. With those sort of markets, nobody's even assigning a price. The price is entirely dependent on supply and demand. So nobody's even trying to use a little sticker machine to, stick a price on it because the price is in constant flux. Now, behind the scenes, that's true for everything, including eggs. If you go to egg futures and wheat futures and soybean futures, those prices are constantly changing. There's not a set price. Now, the grocery store they don't want to have little TV screens with the price of eggs popping up and down every couple seconds. And so they just pick a price near the midpoint and slap it on there and just leave it for a few hours or a few days or a few weeks. That's sort of close enough. Now, sometimes you get shortages. Sometimes you go to the grocery store and they don't have what you want. And that means they chose a price that was a little too low and people bought more than the supply. Sometimes you go to the grocery store and the stuff on it is expired. It's because they chose a price that was a little too high. It was just high enough that not quite all of it got bought in time before it expired. So they're guessing. The grocery store is guessing. But what gives Bitcoin its worth? Who determines the price? Who determines the value? It's all based on supply and demand. Now, you may be thinking, but wait, if everybody stopped valuing Bitcoin, the price would drop precipitously. That is true for literally 100% of things on the earth. If people stopped valuing insurance, the price would go to zero. If people stopped eating eggs, the price would go to zero. If people stopped driving cars, the price would go to zero. The price of everything would go to zero if people stopped valuing it. So you might be thinking, okay, but what keeps people from stopping to value Bitcoin? What's going to keep everyone from waking up tomorrow and deciding Bitcoin's not valuable, they don't want it anymore? And the answer for that is people need money because barter, where you like trade eggs for a pair of shoes and things like that, barter is incredibly inefficient and impossible to be workable in a modern economy. where there is so many goods and services you could possibly want. It's impossible in a modern economy for you to show up at a restaurant and talk to the owner and say, hey, what thing of value could I do today to earn a meal? Well, the very first person who shows up might be able to like mow the lawn, do the weed eating, and edging. But what about the very second person that shows up? Like within two or three or four people, the restaurant's going to run out of random stuff that random people can do, which means you need a way of storing your time and energy, which is what money does. Money stores your time and energy so you can use it later. If everybody wanted your skill set all the time, you could actually live life without money. You could show up to a restaurant, do 7 minutes of work, eat lunch. You could show up to buy a car, do 2 weeks of work, buy the car, or, whatever, a year of work, however long it works. But you would not need to store up. I guess in the case of a car, you would, because you can't buy like a little piece of the car with each hour of work. So even there, you've got to do enough work to accumulate enough money to buy bigger purchases. So money is what stores your time and energy. You've probably never thought about it that way, but that's actually what's happening. What's actually happening behind the scenes is that money is storing your time and energy so that you can use it later to go buy a car or eat at a restaurant or buy insurance or buy a dozen eggs. So because humans need money, Bitcoin is valuable because Bitcoin is a better money than any other money that exists. Gold, for example, does not work well as money because it's not divisible, it's not portable in large amounts, it's too hard to verify that it actually is gold, and it's not just like tungsten with gold, gold wrapped around it. It's just there's no good way to use precious metals in a modern economy to buy stuff. It's too hard to tell what they are, if it's legit, all that sort of stuff. And so most people use the US dollar because it's easier to divide into 100 pennies, and it's verifiable and stuff like that generally, because it's hard to counterfeit it. But the problem with the US dollar is the government, the central bank, the Federal Reserve, we call it in the United States, the central bank never stops printing more of them, which means they're cheating you constantly. Your time and energy is being stored up by hard work, and then they print money out of thin air that didn't cost them anything. And so they're constantly devaluing your hard work. You try to save up a year of your hard earned time and energy, and in that same amount of time, they print 3%, 4%, 7%. On average, it's about 7% more US dollars per year. They print on average 7% out of thin air every year. So no matter how hard you try to save up your time and energy in US dollars, the government is debasing, meaning taking away, meaning diluting your time and energy by 7% every year. And that shows up in inflation. It also shows up in the price, the fact that you don't get price decreases on most of the things you buy, which you normally would. Humans get better at making stuff, so normally stuff should be getting cheaper. Eggs should be getting cheaper every year. Meat should be getting cheaper. Insurance should be getting cheaper. Everything should be getting cheaper by between 3% and 5% per year because we keep getting better at doing stuff. But the government stole that from you by printing money out of thin air. You don't even know that everything ought to be getting cheaper. In addition to that, they added the inflation on top of that for an extra 3%, 4%, up to 9% per year. So not only is your stuff not getting cheaper, it's actually getting more expensive, which is where that 7% is disappearing. Typically, you're losing 3 or 4% of that because you're not getting the price decreases, and then you're getting hit with a 3 or 4% inflation, and often a lot higher than that. So humans need money. They're going to continue to use money. Money is going to continue to outcompete less good money, and Bitcoin is a better money. So the reason people are not going to stop using Bitcoin is because it forces them to use something else. Gold is not good as money, and the US dollar is not good as money. So there's nothing that works as well at storing your time and energy for the long term as Bitcoin. Now, because the adoption of Bitcoin is so low worldwide, only about 5% of the world owns any Bitcoin, and most of that 5%, it's a very small percentage of their net worth. Someone like me, I've got 100% of my net worth in Bitcoin, but that's rare. In the future, a much higher percentage of the world will own Bitcoin, and a much higher percent of their net worth of the people that own Bitcoin will be in Bitcoin. As a result, in the future, the price will be much, much, much higher, somewhere north of $1 million per Bitcoin. And it will be that way because Bitcoin is a better money, because humans need money, and because Bitcoin is backed by math, it's backed by cryptography, it's backed by energy, it's backed by its anonymous creation, it's backed by open source software, it's backed by all of the things that make a money good, that make a money divisible, durable, portable, verifiable, authenticatable, recognizable, and most important, the most important attribute of any money is scarcity. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. There's already 22 trillion US dollars sloshing around, and that number is unlimited. It just keeps going up. Tomorrow it'll be higher than today. The next day it'll be higher than that. No matter how hard you work, if you're saving in US dollars, they're losing value. And as a result of that, more and more people are figuring out that Bitcoin works as better money than the US dollar. And as those people convert their US dollars to Bitcoin, the price, even though it'll be volatile in the short term, it will go up in the long term because it's valuable. So what gives Bitcoin worth? Demand. What gives money? Demand. Barter sucks and nobody wants to barter for everything we need. So we're going to use money, and better monies outcompete lesser monies. Bitcoin is the best money that humans have ever discovered or invented. And as a result, the price goes up as people adopt it and realize it's better money. And it works just like anything else with supply and demand, where the price is determined and you can just see it in real time. If the grocery store showed you the price of everything in real time that was constantly changing by the second, I think people would have an easier time understanding Bitcoin because they would understand that all markets work that way. But a lot of people are confused because they think the prices they see are what the thing is worth without realizing, no, that's just an arbitrary price the grocery store chose based on their best guess of supply and demand. So you determine Bitcoin's worth. 8 billion people determine Bitcoin's worth. And the reason Bitcoin's not going anywhere and will continue to keep going up in the long term, it goes up and down on its way up. The reason that happens is because people value money because they need to store their time and their energy. And Bitcoin is by far the best way to do that. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks.